You're not real! You're not real.
Film is the ultimate artistic medium so far devised by man. It combines photography, motion, visual arts, acting, writing, and music, a sensory experience that engages us so completely that watching a movie is often compared to dreaming. So would that make horror films nightmares?
Makeup effects and special effects go back to the very dawn of cinema. All of the directors of the modern age would fully admit they can dream up the monster, but someone actually has to make it real. And it's the makeup artists and the special effects artists that make dreams real. You know, horror as a genre and fantasy underwent a huge sea change in the late 60s and early 70s. It still had elements of the fantastic, but began to embrace the real in a very serious way in the late 60s with a movie like, say, Rosemary's Baby, or in the early 70s with a film like The Exorcist, which Dick Smith worked on. They really embedded the horror in the now and in the everyday world, which was not the horror of Vincent Price, the Wolfman, Dracula, where it's all haunted castles in a far-off land with eerie music. It's very creepy, but nothing that actually the audience necessarily relates to. It's still fantasy. And so what people like Dick Smith did, if you think of those scenes in The Exorcist, when her head twists around and she vomits, it's incredibly scary because it looks like it's happening.
There are a lot of reasons why Stephen King's It was ripe for revival on screen in 2017. It had been 27 years since the last adaptation, which is a fateful number in the story. Clowns are still pretty damn scary, and well, the 1990 TV miniseries simply couldn't capture the most terrifying elements of King's bestseller under network restrictions and a small screen budget. The outdated special effects in particular have rendered certain portions of the original It film laughable instead of frightening. Even so, there are certain scenes in the 1990 miniseries that still hold up, and are actually even scarier than the new big screen adaptation. The 2017 version of It includes a memorably terrifying sequence in which Pennywise comes to life within a sinister slideshow. But the 1990 version of that moment is a bit eerier in some respects. Bill Denbrough is alone and still completely grief-stricken about his brother Georgie's funeral when he first comes into contact with it. He skims through a book of photos when all of a sudden Georgie's most recent picture winks at him and starts oozing blood. What's worse is that Bill's parents are more concerned about him not belonging in the room than finding out what he saw, or more importantly, what they can't see. It's nightmarish enough not to be believed or heard by your parents, but when they're smearing invisible blood all over your murdered brother's room, it's even worse. Pennywise's page bouncing also comes into play later on, when the losers look at Mike's dad's photo album about Derry's many child murder sprees, and the town square's carnival comes to life with a certain dancing clown at the center. If the slow burn of him coming into closer, full-color view isn't scary enough, the fact that he then reaches through the page to grab at the losers should keep you up at night.
You know, I wonder at times if the era of great monsters isn't sort of over. You know, in the age of computer-generated imagery, the ability to create almost anything that an artist dreams up, in some ways you actually wonder if that doesn't hurt the presentation of monsters on screen. There was something about the limits of makeup that allowed creativity within that limits to flourish. And so there's something about those handmade monsters, whether it's Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion effects or Greg Nicotero's zombies from The Walking Dead. There's something about the fact that they're man-made, you can tell, that makes them scarier and more authentic than a digital image.
And 3, 2, 1, action!
And then visual effects will pick up, much like we did with Bicycle Girl last year, and they'll remove the lower part of his legs as he sort of crawls around a little bit.
And as it dries, it'll lighten up a little bit. Essentially here we'll be putting a little bit of a rib cage and maybe some spine, as well as a lot of like hanging intestine-y and gory, gross stuff.
Fans and moviegoers in general have become so much more sophisticated in what they expect in the effects of their films. I mean, now TV shows have the quality of effects that you were used to seeing only in feature films, 15 years ago. Practical effects have a marriage, and that marriage is becoming more and more solid as the technology in both areas grow.